Lesson 50, completing the square. When we talk about completing the square, we're talking about taking an equation, a quadratic equation, and working with it until we get it into the form where it's a binomial squared. That square is what we're completing. Let's review how to solve that equation. To get rid of square, we do the inverse operation, which is a square root to both sides. Don't forget your plus or minus. Square root and square cancel. And then we need to bring the 3 to the other side. Okay, so that's how you solve once you get it in the form where it's a binomial squared. Let's look at how to get a quadratic equation in that form. The first thing you want to do is to move all terms with an x to one side of the equation. So I need to move my 4 to the other side of the equation. X squared plus 6x is equal to 4. I left that space on purpose. We're about to put a number there. And then our second step is to take half of the number by your x and square it. So when I look at the number by my x, that's a 6. Half of 6 is 3. 3 squared is 9. So we're going to add 9 to both sides of the equation. So add to both sides. Our third step is to factor. When we factor, we start with x, and if it's a plus sign, we have plus half the number by the x, close your parentheses, squared. And it's going to factor that way every time. So in our problem, we'll do x plus half of 6 is 3, close it, squared. And that's equal to 13. And now we're back to where we know how to solve. Get rid of the square, we're going to square root both sides. Don't forget your plus or minus. Square and square root cancel. Alright, and then the last step is to solve. Bring the 3 over. And there you have solved by completing the square. Let's look at another example. X squared plus 2x plus 5, no, let's do minus 5, is equal to 0. We'll start by moving all terms with an x to one side and move the number to the other side. So it becomes a positive 5. Half of the number beside the x, that's half of 2 is 1, 1 squared is 1. Add it to both sides. Then you factor. Bring down the x, bring down the plus sign, half of 2 is 1, squared. To get rid of square, you square root. Don't forget the plus or minus. Bring the 1 over, it becomes negative. Okay, now we're going to do one that's slightly more difficult. X squared is equal to 5x minus 5. We start by getting the x's together, so I'm going to bring my 5 over. It becomes a negative 5x, and that's equal to negative 5. The reason this problem is a little more difficult is because 5 is odd, and so it won't divide evenly. When you take half of 5, leave it as a fraction. So half of 5 is 5 halves. And then you square that. And that's 25 fourths. So I'm going to add 25 over 4 to both sides. Then factor x minus, this time, 5 over 2 squared. We need a common denominator to add those. So negative 5 can be rewritten as negative 20 over 4. Add it together and we get 5/4. Get rid of the square, we square root. Plus or minus, square and square root cancel. And now we need to simplify that square root. The square root of 5 does not simplify, so it stays square root of 5. But square root of 4 is 2. So we replace that with the 2. You want to make sure you never leave a square root in the denominator. Bring the 5/2 over and it becomes positive. And there you have solved it.